Anna sat at the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her felt like a stranger. Her long, silky hair was neatly braided, her body wrapped in the delicate lace nightgown that her husband, Michael, had once bought for her. It had been meant to ignite passion, but now it was just another piece of clothing. Michael lay beside her, completely engrossed in his phone, his face illuminated by the screen's cold glow. He didn't notice her standing up, didn't ask why she had been so distant lately, didn't sense the storm brewing inside her. She walked into the bathroom and locked the door behind her, staring into the mirror as she turned on the faucet. A slow breath escaped her lips. There was a fire inside her, a hunger, a longing. But no one saw it. No one touched it. She had been a faithful wife for nearly 9 years. A loving, devoted, loyal wife. But what had it brought her? A predictable routine. Passionless nights. A husband who barely looked at her anymore. Tonight, she made a decision. 7 nights. 7 men. 7 ways to reclaim herself. Day 1. Victor, the trainer. The gym smelled of metal, sweat, and rubber. The rhythmic clang of weights and the low hum of treadmills filled the space. Anna stood before the mirror, adjusting her sports bra and running a hand over her toned stomach. She had been coming here for months, not just to stay in shape but because she liked the way men looked at her when she walked past. But today, she was here for only one man, Victor. Tall, strong, his dark eyes sharp and focused. His presence commanded attention. He was her personal trainer, and she had always felt something between them, an unspoken tension, an awareness of each other. She finished her squats, feeling his gaze on her as she straightened up. "You're pushing yourself hard today," he commented, arms crossed over his broad chest. Anna smiled, wiping a bead of sweat from her temple. "Maybe I need a different kind of release." His brow lifted slightly, his expression unreadable at first. Then, after a pause, a knowing smirk touched his lips. "I think I can help with that." Minutes later, they were inside a small staff locker room, the air thick with anticipation. Anna's back pressed against the cool metal lockers as Victor leaned in, his breath hot against her skin. "Are you sure?" he murmured, his lips barely brushing hers. "More than ever," she whispered. And then he kissed her. It was rough, urgent, nothing like the lifeless kisses Michael gave her before bed. His hands roamed her body, strong fingers gripping her waist, pulling her closer. Her pulse pounded as he lifted her, her legs wrapping around his torso. She let go of everything. For the first time in years, she felt alive. When it was over, she smoothed her hair in the mirror, feeling a wicked smile tug at the corners of her lips. "Feeling better?" Victor asked, adjusting his shirt. "Much better," she replied. Walking out of the gym, she felt lighter, bolder. Michael barely looked up when she got home. "How was your workout?" he asked, his eyes still on his phone. Anna bit her lip, remembering Victor's touch, his hands, his lips. "It was exactly what I needed," she said. And tomorrow, there would be another man. Day 2. Anton, the bartender. The bar was dimly lit, bathed in a warm, amber glow. The scent of whiskey, leather, and cigar smoke filled the air. Anna sat at the counter, her fingers lazily tracing the rim of her wine glass. She had dressed for this, tight red dress, high heels, lips painted a deep crimson. She knew she looked irresistible. Anton, the bartender, had been watching her all night. Tall, lean, with smirking hazel eyes and tattoos peeking out from under his sleeves. He had an easy confidence about him, the kind of man who knew exactly what he was doing. "You look like you're waiting for something," he said, pouring another glass without her asking. Anna tilted her head, meeting his gaze. "Maybe I am." He smirked, resting his hands on the counter as he leaned in. "Want to wait here after I close up?" "That depends," she murmured, taking a slow sip. "Are you worth waiting for?" His chuckle was low, dark, promising. An hour later, the bar was empty except for the two of them. He locked the door, turning back to her with a wicked glint in his eyes. "Come with me," he said. The storage room was small, cluttered with boxes of liquor. He pushed her against the wall, his lips capturing hers in a hungry kiss. The scent of whiskey and leather enveloped her. His hands moved with expert precision, undoing the straps of her dress, fingers sliding over her bare skin. Her breath hitched as he lifted her onto the counter, knocking over a bottle in the process. "Oops," she whispered against his lips. "I'll clean it up later," he murmured, before capturing her mouth again. She gasped as he claimed her, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body arching into him. It was raw, wild, reckless. When it was over, she caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bar, flushed cheeks, swollen lips, hair a mess. She felt fucking amazing. Michael was already asleep when she slipped into bed. He never noticed the faint scent of whiskey on her skin. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow would bring something new. Date 3. Oliver, the taxi driver. The street lights flickered as Anna stepped out of the bar, the night air cool against her heated skin. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and opened her phone to request a ride home. The app notified her that her driver had arrived. A sleek black car rolled up to the curb, and she slid into the backseat. The smell of leather and faint cologne filled the space. "Anna?" the driver asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "That's me." His name on the screen read Oliver. He had strong hands gripping the wheel, the kind of hands that knew how to take control. His dark hair was slightly tousled, jawline sharp, a hint of stubble grazing his skin. The way his gaze lingered on her in the mirror sent a shiver down her spine. "Long night?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth. Anna crossed her legs, the slit in her dress exposing just enough skin. "You could say that." A pause. His eyes flickered to her again, as if debating something. "Where to?" She hesitated. Her home address was already entered, but instead of answering, she leaned forward slightly, resting her arm on the console between them. "Where would you take me, if I let you choose?" She saw his throat bob as he swallowed. The grip on the wheel tightened. Then, with a slow exhale, he made a sharp turn, exiting the main road. Excitement pooled in her stomach. The car came to a stop in a secluded parking lot near a dimly lit alley. It was quiet, hidden from the city's prying eyes. Oliver turned in his seat, his gaze locking onto hers. "Are you sure about this?" Anna smiled, unfastening her seatbelt. More than anything, he wasted no time. In a fluid motion, he reached for her, pulling her into the front seat, her knees straddling his lap. Their lips crashed together, his hands exploring her curves through the thin fabric of her dress. The car's interior was filled with heavy breaths and low moans. His rough hand slid up her thighs, lifting her slightly as she pressed against him. Outside, the world continued moving, cars passing on distant roads, people oblivious to what was unfolding inside this vehicle. Her head fell back as he traced his lips down her throat, his grip tightening around her waist. The windows fogged up from the heat between them, the outside world disappearing entirely. For the third night in a row, she felt something awaken inside her. Something dangerous. Something addictive. When it was over, she adjusted her dress, catching her reflection in the mirror. Her lips were swollen, her hair a mess, but she looked alive. Oliver smirked, reaching to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I don't usually do this," he admitted. Anna chuckled, running her fingers down his jaw. "Neither do I." She stepped out of the car, legs slightly unsteady, and walked toward her building without looking back. Michael was in bed when she entered, his soft snores filling the room. She slipped under the sheets beside him, her heart still pounding. Tomorrow, another man would take his place. Day 4. Ethan, the colleague. The office was bustling as usual, the sound of clicking keyboards and distant phone calls filling the air. Anna sat at her desk, scrolling through emails, but her mind was elsewhere. Across the room sat Ethan. Sharp suit, glasses that made him look intelligent but not intimidating, a charming smile that made women in the office blush when he looked at them. He was different from the others. More refined. More controlled. But she had seen the way he glanced at her when he thought no one was watching. And today, she would make sure he didn't just watch. At lunch, she made her move, walking past his desk, pausing just long enough to drop a small note beside his keyboard. Conference room. 8 p.m. Don't keep me waiting. She didn't need to check if he had read it. She already knew his answer. By the time the office had emptied out, she made her way to the dimly lit conference room, her pulse thrumming with anticipation. The door opened, and Ethan stepped inside, closing it behind him. "Anna, what's this about?" he asked, though the way he looked at her said he already knew. She leaned against the long table, crossing one leg over the other, her blouse unbuttoned just enough to tease. "I think you know exactly what this is about." Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "This is dangerous," he murmured. Anna smiled, standing up and walking toward him. "That's what makes it exciting." He didn't resist when she pressed against him, her hands sliding over his chest. His fingers found her waist, pulling her closer, their lips mere inches apart. "If we do this, there's no going back," he warned. Anna didn't hesitate. "Then don't hold back." Their lips met in a slow, controlled kiss, one that quickly spiraled into something more urgent. His hands roamed her body, gripping her hips as he backed her against the table. Papers scattered to the floor as she pulled him closer, her nails digging into his back. It was different from the others. Less primal, more calculated. He wasn't rushing, he was savoring, exploring, learning her. When it was over, they stood in silence, catching their breath. Ethan reached down, buttoning his shirt, his gaze still locked onto hers. "I don't know what this means," he admitted. Anna smoothed her skirt, a smirk playing on her lips. "It means you'll think about me every time you walk into this room." She grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving him standing there, staring after her. Michael barely acknowledged her when she got home, mumbling something about a work deadline before turning over in bed. She lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, knowing she was already too far gone to stop. Tomorrow, she would go even further. Day 5. Nathan. The stranger at the hotel. Anna needed something different. Something riskier. The men before had been thrilling, but they had all been familiar in some way. Tonight, she wanted a stranger. She had chosen a hotel bar on the other side of the city, one she had never been to before. It was elegant, dimly lit, filled with the quiet murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses. A place where people came to disappear. She took a seat at the bar, crossing her legs slowly, knowing she was being watched. She wore a black dress, cut dangerously high on one side, with a plunging neckline that left little to the imagination. She wasn't here to be subtle. And then she saw him. Nathan. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, dark stubble lining his sharp jaw. He was older, maybe late 40s, with the kind of presence that commanded attention. His fingers tapped the rim of his whiskey glass as he looked at her, his gaze dark, unreadable. When she met his eyes, he smirked slightly. "Are you waiting for someone?" Anna lifted her glass to her lips, taking a slow sip. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just seeing where the night takes me." Nathan chuckled, setting his drink down. "And where would you like it to take you?" Her pulse quickened. "Somewhere exciting." He didn't say another word. Instead, he stood, offering his hand. She hesitated only for a second before taking it. He led her through the hotel's grand hallway, past expensive paintings and polished marble floors, to the elevator. As the doors slid closed, silence stretched between them, thick with anticipation. He pressed the button for the 14th floor. Then, without warning, he turned to her, one hand slipping to the small of her back, pulling her flush against him. "Are you sure about this?" His voice was low, almost a growl. Anna's breath hitched as she looked up at him. "I don't want to be careful tonight." The second the doors opened, he guided her down the hall, unlocking a suite with smooth efficiency. The door barely clicked shut before his lips crashed against hers. Nathan wasn't like the others. He didn't hesitate. He took. His hands roamed her body, fingers sliding over the thin fabric of her dress as if memorizing every curve. Her back hit the wall as he trailed kisses down her throat, his touch igniting every nerve. She gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders as he lifted her with ease, carrying her toward the king-sized bed in the center of the dimly lit room. For hours, she lost herself in him. His confidence, his control, the way he knew exactly what to do without asking. When it was over, she lay beside him, staring at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her skin still tingled, her body pleasantly sore. Nathan turned to her, studying her expression. "You don't belong to anyone, do you?" Anna smirked, reaching for her dress. "Not tonight." She left before dawn, slipping out of the hotel and into a cab. When she got home, Michael was asleep. She climbed into bed beside him, her mind still replaying the night's events. Tomorrow, she would take things even further. Day 6. James, the neighbor. Anna hadn't planned for this. She was supposed to keep her affairs far from home, in places where no one would suspect her. But then James had knocked on her door. Her neighbor. The one she had exchanged polite nods with in the hallway, the one who had helped her carry groceries once. Tall, dark-haired, with an easygoing charm. "Sorry to bother you," he said, running a hand through his tousled hair. "My Wi-Fi's down. Do you mind if I use yours for a bit?" She hesitated. Letting him in was dangerous. But wasn't that the point? She stepped aside, letting him enter. He sat on her couch, typing something on his laptop, while she leaned against the kitchen counter, watching him. She shouldn't do this. She had never been with someone so close to home. But the thrill of risk only made her want it more. "You look like you have something on your mind," James said, glancing up at her. Anna took a slow sip of wine. "Maybe I do." His gaze darkened slightly. "Care to share?" She set her glass down and walked toward him, taking the laptop from his hands and placing it on the table. Then she straddled his lap, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I think you already know." For a second, he didn't move. Then his hands found her hips, gripping them tightly. "You're playing a dangerous game. I like danger." Their lips met in a slow, burning kiss. Unlike the others, this wasn't rushed. James took his time, his hands exploring, his mouth teasing. The thrill of being in her own apartment, of knowing her husband could walk in at any moment, only made it hotter. When it was over, she lay on the couch beside him, catching her breath. "We can't do this again," James murmured, but the way his fingers traced lazy circles on her thigh told a different story. Anna smirked, running her nails down his chest. "We'll see." Day 7. Lucas, the first love. It was poetic, really. After 6 nights of reckless abandon, it only felt right to end it with the man who had once owned her heart. Lucas. The first man she had ever loved. The one who had broken her heart before Michael had come along to pick up the pieces. They hadn't spoken in years. And yet, when she sent him a simple message, "I need to see you," he responded within minutes. They met at a quiet cafe, and the moment she saw him, she knew this was inevitable. His blue eyes still held that same intensity. He had changed, aged well, grown into himself, but when he smiled at her, it was like no time had passed. "I never thought I'd hear from you again," he admitted, studying her. Anna stirred her coffee, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Neither did I." An hour later, they were tangled in the sheets of a hotel room, limbs entwined. Their bodies remembering each other in ways their minds had long forgotten. It wasn't just lust this time. It was something deeper. When it was over, Lucas traced a finger along her shoulder. "Why now?" he asked. Anna stared at the ceiling, exhaling slowly. "I just needed to remember who I was," and she had. She dressed, kissed him one last time, and walked away, knowing she would never see him again. When she got home that night, Michael was waiting for her. But this time, his expression was different. He knew. And everything was about to change. Anna returned home that evening, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. The house was quiet, unnervingly so. She set down her purse, smoothing the fabric of her dress, preparing to slip into the familiar routine. But something was different. Michael was sitting in the living room, his posture tense, fingers laced together as he stared at nothing in particular. The air in the room felt thick, charged with something she couldn't quite place. Her heart pounded. "You're home early," she said casually, though her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. Michael looked up. His eyes, usually warm, if distant, were unreadable. "I know," 2 words. "Heavy." "Certain." Anna's breath caught in her throat. "Know what?" Michael exhaled, standing up slowly, as if measuring his words. "Everything." Silence stretched between them. Anna forced herself to stay calm, but she could feel her pulse hammering at the base of her throat. "Michael, what are you talking about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past her, stopping just short of the bedroom door. When he turned back, his face was eerily composed. "I found the hotel receipts," he said. "The calls you thought I wouldn't notice. The messages you deleted but forgot to erase from the cloud." Anna's fingers curled into her palms. So, this was it. Michael knew. He had proof. There was no talking her way out of this, no feigning innocence. The game was over. "And?" she asked, meeting his gaze. Michael studied her for a long moment, then let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "You don't even deny it," she didn't. What was the point? For the past week, she had been someone else. Someone who lived freely, who indulged, who took what she wanted without apology. Now, that woman had to face the consequences. Michael shook his head, rubbing a hand over his face. "I've been thinking about what to do," he said finally. "If I should get angry. If I should fight for this. If you're even worth fighting for anymore." That last sentence stung, sharper than she expected. "And?" she asked again, voice quieter now. Michael met her gaze one last time before turning away. "I'll send the divorce papers tomorrow." A single breath escaped Anna's lips, but she felt no surprise. Deep down, she had known this was coming. Michael walked past her, grabbing his coat from the chair. "Spend the night thinking about why you threw everything away," he said before stepping out the door. The house fell silent again. Anna stood there for a long time, unmoving. 7 nights. 7 men. 7 stolen moments of passion. And now, standing alone in the aftermath, she wondered if it had been worth it. She closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she wasn't sure. The end.